And part of the reason why the show has been such a great success during football season is this guy here, KC Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider, and he joins me now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Happy holidays, Happy New Year to you, KC. How are you, pal?
Doing great. Happy holidays to you guys as well. Appreciate it.
Oh, man, I can't believe Week 16 is here. It's my last show of the year. I'll be out next week, and the Eagles somehow made it here with meaningful football. So let's kind of dive into this one here. They beat the Rams. It keeps them kind of relevant. But in beating the Rams, Casey, what new revelation did we make about this Eagle offense?
They have a vertical game they didn't have before. They haven't had a vertical game for most of the season, but they've done a lot better of late in that category. And it partially, I think you see what happens that maybe Wentz didn't want to throw the ball downfield as much as he should have. And last week, I mean, Jeffrey, 5 receptions for 143 yards on vertical passes. There were many games this year where the Eagles didn't get 143 yards total, and Alshon got that all by himself. The only thing was, he's the only receiver to catch a vertical pass last week, so it's kind of the entire passing game. But it doesn't matter if you got one guy who can catch all of his vertical targets. That's enough.
Is this because the Eagles' offensive line was better, that they play called differently? What would your reasoning be as to why Alshon Jeffrey was able to get behind the defense and be a part of the offense? 8 catches, 160. But, Casey, it's the third most yards he's ever had.
It is. I think it's a lot of it had to do with just the fact that it wasn't play calling. It wasn't like more aggressive play calling because we keep track at ESPN Stats and Information to keep track of a number of routes run, if you're running vertical routes or not. Alshon runs 9 vertical routes in that game, and he's targeted on 5 of them. It's a 55.6% target rate, and he caught all 5 of them, so it's 55.6% of his receptions and vertical passes. Those are both incredible numbers, and what it says is that you've got him, you're not running that many vertical passes. When they do, they're throwing to him because he had 9 vertical routes, Nelson Aguilar had 9 vertical routes, Ertz had 8 vertical routes, even Tate had 6 vertical routes. I mean, they had not that many routes altogether because some of those can be run on the same play, obviously, but they had not that many vertical routes, and when they were, Jeffrey was the guy they're going to. I just think that now they're saying, look, we're going to just put a 50-50 ball up there. I think it's something that Wentz didn't want to do, and I think it's something that Foles has decided, I can do that. I'll just go and put it up there and take the chance.
The Eagles, obviously in this game, let's look at their offensive line against that Texans defensive line. Let's start there. Aaron Donald last week, they held up pretty well. J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney, Whitney Merciless, this is a pretty good pass rush they're going to see here. How do they match up against the Texans D? What are they? They're a 3-4 team, so how do they match up with this front seven?
Surprisingly well. I do a set of matchups for ESPN's fantasy section and on a Wednesday article I write that looks at blocking matchups and how they impact fantasy football, and I grade all the matchups. In Philadelphia, in the pass blocking matchup this week, they have the 10th most favorable pass blocking matchup because over the past 5 weeks, which is what that article measures, they rank 8th in overall pass blocking efficiency. And the Texans and their pass rushing, they're good, but they rank 15th in the league in that category. When you add the two together, the Eagles have a favorable pass blocking matchup, which is kind of surprising. And they got a very unfavorable run blocking matchup, 23rd in run blocking. So I have a feeling that this is a matchup where they are going to want to throw more often and say, okay, Houston, we think we can pass block and keep your guys out of there.
All right, what about if Philly wants to try to run the ball? I see they're 26th in the league against the pass, but just 4th in the league against the run. The Eagles have been kind of balancing out here. Is this a week, though, where you would say, you know what, you might want to throw the ball a little bit more?
I think that you still got to do change of pace in the running game. I still think you have to do. Plus, the backs that they have. I mean, Sproles was hitting some plays last week. You want to give the ball to him. I still think some of their running game is going to come from throwing balls to Golden Tate, throwing short passes, because that's what he does. Use your screen passes. You've got Tate. You've got a screen pass catcher out there. You might as well use him. And you've got Sproles. You might as well use him. And I think even the other backs, I think that you can involve them in the screen game. And I think they kind of need to do that because as much as you want to rely on talent to keep those pass rushers out of there, you better be making them think about screens too, because if you just go straight 5- and 7-step drops and challenge them, eventually they're going to win a couple of those, and that can be turnovers if it does. So I think you got to keep the pass rush thinking about other things too.
We talk about Ertz every week. He was pretty much a non-factor last week. Was it because the Eagles just said, let's go do something else, or did the Rams take him away, and how could the Texans match up with Zach Ertz?
I don't like the fact that he runs 8 vertical routes last week. Is not even targeted one time. That's very atypical for him, because if you go back to say, and again I measure him 5-week increments, you go back to all the way to week 11, he runs 34 routes and he's targeted 10 times. That's a pretty good target per routes run rate. Although he only caught since week 11, he's only caught 8.8% of what we call receptions per route basis, how many catches you're making versus how many routes you're running on vertical passes. 8.8% is what he's done over the past 5 weeks. That's not a good number. So I don't know if defenses are just saying we're not going to let you catch vertical passes, or we're going to, if you're running combinations of somebody else, we're going to take you away and let the receiver underneath be the person who catches the ball. We're going to take that away. I have a feeling that's what they're doing, but that's why it's important for Jeffrey to keep stepping up, because if he can hit you with big passes downfield and such, and you've got to start worrying about that, then you've got to put Ertz in situations where he's one-on-one.
Third down, Texans are ranked 19th in the league. They allow teams to convert almost 40% of the time. They're also 30th in the league in red zone scoring. So if you can move the ball, drive down on this team, this is a team that bends and breaks a lot here. So Eagles offense against that Texans defense, we'll see how that goes. The Eagles finally scored over 30 points last week. Let's look at the Eagles defense. DeAndre Hopkins, got to start there. How do you contain him?
I don't know that you do, although I think a lot of times that Houston, they're so Hopkins-centric that they'll adjust their play calling to whatever you do on defense. So if the Eagles can do what they did last week and sit in shell coverages, the Texans won't just say, we're going to throw, if Hopkins is deep, we're just going to throw it in the double coverage. They'll do that if they have to, but they usually will adjust things and say, if you're going to stop him deep, we're going to start throwing shorter stuff, which if they'll do that in this game, great. Let them do that. Go ahead and say, look, we're going to sit 9 yards out of the ball. Hopkins, you're not catching anything deep, and we're just going to come up and tackle you. And it's tough to think of that, but if you're getting 10 targets to him and most of them are short pass targets, okay, you can live with that, because he's the one guy on this offense that really can tear the top off the defense. Because I'm worried about Demaryius Thomas. He's more of a possession receiver at this point. If they have Kiki Kuti, their slot wide receiver, he's been out for a few weeks. He's banged up. I'm not too worried about him. Their tight end is terrible, Ryan Griffin. He's not anything of a threat. So if I'm them, I'm just give them what they want on Hopkins, or give them certain things on Hopkins, or just take other things away, or at least make them throw in the coverages, because I think they'll adjust to that.
What about Miller? He's questionable, but what's their run game like here?
I don't really think their run game is. I mean, the run game is good. The run game has an A- in run blocking. They rank 8th over the past 5 weeks. And they've got the 9th most favorable run defense. But again, as we mentioned with the Eagles ranked 16th in my run defense metrics over the past 5 weeks. So it's not very good. But as is usual with them, a lot of that has to do with when they allow teams to get good blocking, their teams are getting breakaway runs. If they can hold that to a minimum this week, that's a big plus. Plus, Miller is banked up. And Miller's not a breakaway back. He's not a guy, typically speaking. I know he's had some big runs, but he's not a guy, typically speaking, that I think of, okay, he doesn't do great in the good blocking yards per attempt category. He's not a double-digit guy there. He's 8.5. He's league average, a little bit above. So if you can keep him from getting those big breakaway runs, or again, if he's out and Alfred Blue's in there, or they've got Deontay Foreman, if he's back this week, and they've got those guys, I'm not worried about them tearing the top off the defense. So again, just make the tackles when you have to, and keep them to minimal gains there, just like you're doing with Hopkins.
We had Aaron Wilson from the Chronicle on earlier, and I said, if I said the Texans line was not very good, am I being kind? I look at this offensive line when I watch this Texans team, sacked 52 times. I don't think this line's very good. And I thought the Eagles would win the game last week because of their defensive line finally making an impact and taking over. And I think that's exactly what happened, and I think that's what can happen in this game.
Houston's pass block has been terrible all year long. The run block has been really good, I think, in part because I think that because they're running in favorable situations too, that does add to it. But they're 29th in my pass blocking metrics over the past 5 weeks. That's just terrible. That's obviously near the bottom of the league. The thing is, Philadelphia, when I look at their pass rushing metrics over the past 5 weeks, they really aren't very good. They're also 29th. If I shifted that forward, though, and I said, okay, I'm not going to measure the past 5 weeks, maybe the past 3 weeks, those numbers would spike up because their pass rushing had been not so good earlier on. So I think Philadelphia, if we're measuring where they exactly are now instead of a 5-week window, I think they would be more like middle of the league or maybe even close to top 10. And you don't have to have a great pass rush to get after Houston because they have struggled in pass blocking all season long.
Yeah, they sure have. The Eagles have finally got some good impact last week on that defensive front. You look at the Eagles, we talked about Hopkins, but what about the rest of their pass game in terms of the Eagles with their secondary here? Do you think this is, if they can figure out a way to kind of bracket Hopkins, should they be okay? And what about, I know 52 sacks. Is that because the line is that bad, or is that a lot on Watson?
Some of it's on Watson, where he holds the ball too long and such, and he'll and plus when you get a scrambling quarterback and a guy who will run, you'll naturally end up with more sacks in most situations. But give you some numbers on the vertical passing game for Houston. Since week 11, I do 5-week measurements. Since week 11, Hopkins has 271 yards, only completed 21 vertical passes over the past 5 weeks. That's not very many, 4 per game. Hopkins has 12 for 271. Thomas has 5 for 94. Everybody else who they have only as 1. 3 of their tight ends have 1 reception apiece there, so that's where you're probably just attacking the coverage in a particular way. It's not because they've got great tight ends. So really, take Hopkins out, and you kind of bottle their entire game up because everybody else is really not that good on the vertical passing game.
What's one area of this game that you think's a clear advantage where it could lead to victory?
I think a clear advantage is, we just mentioned Houston's pass blocking. I think Philadelphia will be able to get after Hopkins. I think that's a big plus for them. Plus, I think that Houston secondary, they've got Kareem Jackson. He's been up or down over the past years. He was his safety. He's moved back to corner now. He's playing very well. But they've got a nickel cornerback. Might have Sharice right out there. It depends on the health in the secondary. But whoever they've got at nickel corner is trouble for them. And if I'm Philadelphia, I stop trying to throw Aguilar open on vertical passes and say, you're going to go up against their slot cornerback, and we're going to throw you 6, 7, 8 passes, because I don't think their slot cornerback can cover. And if you can do that, that could net as many as 100 yards. It could be a big difference.
All right, KC Joyner's here, Sports Bass Live, 97.3 ESPN. A lot of football still this week with some meaning behind it. We'll break them down. Let's take a look at what these games mean and who's going to win them. KC Joyner, ESPN.com, NFL Insider, right here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. Washington at Tennessee. The Eagle fans cheering for Tennessee here. Washington's been a mess, but they're still in this thing. If they win this week, next week against Philly potentially could be an elimination game. How are the Redskins still alive?
I don't know. I tell you what is catching up with them, though. Their blocking. We talked a few weeks ago about how their blocking was better than what you would think it would be given the injuries they've had. Last 5 weeks now, the metrics are starting to catch up. They're 26th in overall blocking. Tennessee's got a dominant defensive front seven in certain areas. I think Tennessee's going to be able to dominate that end of the game, and that makes a difference.
Big game, Baltimore at the Chargers. Chargers still could get the number 1 seed. Baltimore playing for a wild card. And potentially the AFC North here. This one has the makings of maybe the game of the weekend.
It does, and it's going to be interesting because the Chargers they'd been run blocking very well earlier this year. They dropped back to the middle of the pack in run blocking. Baltimore's run defense is 3rd in my run defense metrics of the past 5 weeks. So it's a big mismatch for the Chargers. They need to get the ball into the air. They need to, hopefully for them, Keenan Allen is healthy, and if he is, then they should, they go to the air and they make Baltimore have to play a catch-up game that they can't play. I think that'll be the difference. If Allen's out, though, I think Baltimore will win this game.
Cleveland still has a shot. Cincinnati at Cleveland. You got this Browns team. It's really been the story of the second half of the season for teams that aren't going to make the playoffs most likely, but Cleveland at home looking pretty good.
Baker Mayfield's playing very well, and he can thank his offensive line because they've been terrible earlier in the year. Over the past 5 weeks, Cleveland is the best pass-blocking team in the league. That's why this is becoming a Baker Mayfield-centric offense, and why their running game, even though they're getting okay run blocking, they're just a little below the league average. They're getting okay run blocking. Chubb's breaking out big games when he does get good blocking. So when you've got that many playmakers versus what Cincinnati has, I like Cleveland on that one.
All right, Tampa's going to Dallas. Dallas can clinch the division if they can win out here. The Eagles still have a shot there, but Tampa's kind of, one of those teams that some weeks their offense is great, some weeks their defense is really bad. How do they match up with this Dallas team? Is there any way that the Cowboys will have some pressure on them next week when they play the Giants? Can they somehow figure out a way to lose to this Tampa team?
What Tampa's going to have to do is try to get vertical because their run blocking it's atrocious. They're worst in the league right now. They got the worst matchup this week, actually. They're 30th over the past 5 weeks. They got the worst matchup of the league by far in run defense or for worse in their running game. I don't think they're going to do anything on the ground. I think they have to go vertical. They get Deshaun Jackson back. Maybe that's a plus for him. Maybe he can do something, but they got to turn this game into a shootout. I don't think they can do that, though. I think that Dallas' secondary is that strong. I think Cowboys win this one.
Minnesota Eagle fans going to be watching this one big time. It's at 1 o'clock, so it'll be going on at the same time. But they're at Detroit. Minnesota has to drop a game somewhere for Philly to have a shot to get in here. They're going to Detroit. Detroit's one of those teams that some weeks they look like the worst team in the league, and then the next week they win. I don't know what's going on with that squad, but Minnesota on the road has not been very good. But Stefanski in. They scored 40 last week. Can Minnesota go to Detroit and slip up?
I think they can, in the sense that Minnesota, the reason they fired their offensive coordinator, in my estimation, is because he was making it more of a pass-happy team than they wanted to be, and I think Zimmer was just like, look, you've got to stop throwing the ball so darn much because that's not what we want to do. It doesn't dovetail well with our defense. So, okay, you're going to go running ball. Going to go run the ball, and the run blocking's been a lot better. You're playing right into Detroit's hands, though, because Detroit is a team that they can't keep up in the shootout because of how banged up the receiving core is. Even Galladay's hurt right now after the great game he had last week. So I get Detroit maybe a 2-10 chance. I think Minnesota, talent-wise, is just that much better.
Giants at Indy. Indy still has a shot here. No OBJ. Giants kind of playing out the string. But the Colts, they've been one of the stories this year.
They have. Their defensive front seven's been fantastic. Darius Leonard, it's a crime that this man did not make the Pro Bowl. You look at, he had think of 7 sacks. He had double-digit tackles nearly every week. He had interceptions. I have him in an IDP league in fantasy football and loved getting double-digit points out of him every week. They've got the defensive front seven is just that strong. And the Giants, not only missing OBJ, they're missing his backup, Russell Shepard. They got a third-string wide receiver. Ingram's going to catch a lot of passes, but the Giants don't have anywhere near enough firepower. Indy wins that handily.
Go to Jacksonville, where they're going to Miami. Miami still has a shot to win the AFC East. Long shot, but they still do have a shot for that and to be a wild card team. So, can the Dolphins make Week 17 a week that they have to, that's still alive in?
It's amazing that Adam Gase isn't getting more play for Coach of the Year, because this team, talent-wise, there's no way they should be in the playoff hunt, or in a divisional playoff hunt especially. There's just no way. The thing is, they probably win this matchup pretty handily, because Jacksonville, as bad as their offense has been, I know people are getting on Cody Kessler. He's bad. They don't have good receivers and all that stuff. Their blocking has just been horrible. It was mediocre earlier this year, and it's just been terrible lately. It gets worse. They're dead last in the league in my blocking metrics the past 5 weeks, and they're trending downward. So I think Miami wins because Jacksonville can't get anybody blocked.
Buffalo at New England. I feel like Buffalo beats New England like one of these random games this year. If it happens this week, New England could be in some trouble, but the game's in New England. They've lost 2 in a row. There's no way they lose 3 straight. Is there?
I'm going to pick New England to win the game, but I'll tell you this. I did an analysis for the ESPN fantasy article I mentioned that I wrote last week, and the Patriots and run defense, I got the good blocking rate metric. If you're on defense and you give up over 50% good blocking rate, you're doing a bad job. If you give up 60%, you're doing an atrocious job. New England's been 69% or higher in 5 of the last 8 weeks. It's terrible. Their run defense is just atrocious. If McCoy is healthy and can play, because you're not going to beat them if you got Keith Ford getting 14 carries like he did last week. If McCoy's healthy and can play, and Buffalo can lean on its ground game, I will not be shocked at all if they win this one.
Green Bay's going to New York. One of the few games this week, doesn't have a lot behind it, but you look at I can't believe holy mackerel, the quarterback for Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, his name slipped me because they don't want him to play. He says he wants to play. He's going to play in a meaningless game.
A lot of players have played meaningless game over the years. I mean, you're paying the guy. I mean, if he's getting paid, and I know you're thinking about his future and things that he wants to play, and it sends a bad message to your team to, hey, we're out of it, and he's kind of banged up. A lot of the players are banged up, and Rodgers was like, hey, I want to be a leader. I like the idea that he's saying I want to play despite this. I mean, the Packers, think back in the day. Yeah, this is even before my time, but Vince Lombardi back in the 60s, he had a time where his team had nothing to play for in the last game of the season. He started all of his starters and went out and tried to beat the Rams out on the West Coast, and nearly pulled it off, too. And a totally meaningless game for them. So I like Rodgers channeling Vince Lombardi in that one.
All right, Rodgers against Darnold in that one. I remembered his name. How did I forget Aaron Rodgers' name? Must be right around the holidays here. All right, Atlanta is at Carolina. Carolina has a minuscule shot to get in. They've lost 6 straight. They're going to go with their backup quarterback because Cam Newton's done, and Atlanta's season has been a disaster.
Atlanta's season has been a disaster. They're probably going to change their offensive coordinator because they've been really up or down. And Sarkisian's he's not a good fit for what that offense wants to be. He tried to adjust his system, his run-first system to that, and it just wasn't working. You need a Kyle Shanahan-style offense to make that team go. The thing is that they've got plenty of firepower on offense. They're blocking well in many ways, and I like where they're at. And Carolina just fell apart without without with Newton at half strength last week. And Taylor Heineke, great story, dedicated the game to his late father and things, and it's a very feel-good story, but I think it's going to end up in a loss for them.
Rams lost 2 in a row. Can't lose in Arizona, though.
They've got the most favorable blocking matchup of the week this week. It's pretty hands down. They're going to just actually get the second most favorable matchup. They could easily have the most favorable if I adjusted the metrics a couple ways, because Arizona's defense is just terrible in their front seven. I think that the streak ends for them. They're going to get back to where they were earlier this year, but their problems aren't done because this is going to be matchup based.
Bears going to San Francisco. 49ers have won 2 straight. Bears, though, they got to get this win if they want to have a shot at that 2 seed.
Last 3 weeks of the season, for 13 weeks, 13, 14, 15, Nick Mullins leads the league in passing yards and yards per attempt. I mean, Nick Mullins, of all people, you wouldn't think that's the case. It tells you how good a coach Shanahan is. I think San Francisco is going to be able to make this more of a shootout than the Bears would like, but the Bears' defense is so powerful right now that I think that's the edge for them.
Steelers going to the Saints, 2 teams that look like playoff teams. Saints struggled offensively last week. Some injuries on that offensive line. Pittsburgh got a game that they typically lose.
Saints they're still blocking well. They rank first in my blocking metrics for the past 5 weeks, so they're able to hold up with that. They're trying to be a run-first team now. That's what they wanted to be coming into the year. They didn't want to be pass-first like they were this year. They just had personnel and matchup situations that made them do that, but they want to be that sort of team. That may play into Pittsburgh's hands because Pittsburgh's not going to be able to run the ball well. They ran the ball well last week because the Patriots' defense is just horrible, but they're going to be able to run the ball this week because the Saints' run defense is really good. They're going to have to be a pass-first team, but they got to do it without Connor. Juju Smith-Schuster has a groin injury. He's officially listed as questionable. It doesn't sound good for him to play. If Juju's out, they definitely lose, but even if Juju's there, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers only win 3 out of 10 if they played at 10 times, so picking the Saints in that one.
I don't know how Seattle lost at home to San Francisco, but they're going to have a redo this week, but this time the opponent's the Chiefs. Chiefs need this one. They got the Chargers knocking on their door. So can Kansas City go into Seattle and can the Seahawks lose twice at home in a row?
It's for the Seahawks to lose, or Chiefs to lose, it's going to be that they're going to have to go up there and do like Minnesota did a couple weeks ago, where it was the crowd got to them and they got rattled. I don't think Mahomes is going to get rattled by that. I don't think the Chiefs will get rattled, and they'll turn that game into a kind of a shootout game that Seattle doesn't want to keep up on. Baldwin's healthy now, and Seattle can throw the football, and they can be very effective, but they want to be a run-first team. So whoever grabs control of the game situations, the game flow, as it were, whoever wins that is going to win the game, and I think the Chiefs, the way they played this year, they'll be the ones to do it.
All right, Denver's going to Oakland, kind of playing out the string. I thought Denver was in prime spot to make the playoffs. They had been playing well. They had a couple upsets, and the schedule was lightening up, and then they threw a stinker up.
They did, and they have no receiving core now. They're playing the third-string tight end. They've got Demaryius Thomas in Houston, and they lost Sanders. And look, the Deshaun Hamilton and Tim Patrick. I mean, people nobody's ever heard of. They're decent receivers, but you just can't build a passing game around that. Having said that, Oakland is just they're the worst front seven in the NFL over the past 5 weeks. It's not even close. So I think Denver, with Phillip Lindsay, the first undrafted rookie to make the Pro Bowl in his rookie season, I think that'll be for them.
And Philly's at home against the Texans. Which way do you lean on Sunday for that?
I think the Eagles have many paths to victory in that one. I think the Texans they're a very good team, but they're I don't want to say a flawed team, but they have limitations to them. If Philadelphia can get creative like they did last week and do certain things to limit what Houston does, I think that they could win that game. But I mentioned I always pick who's going to play the game 10 times who I think is going to win. I think Houston would win 6 out of 10, so I'm going to pick them, but I won't be surprised at all if the Eagles win it.
All right, there's your look at Week 16 in the NFL. KC Joyner here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Of course, happy holidays, happy New Year, KC, and he'll be back to recap all the games with the guys on Monday's show as the Eagles take on the Texans right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, pal.
Appreciate it, man.